I believe that human beings are far more capable than we realize. I believe that human beings have been significantly more advanced in our past than we are currently in terms of architecture, spiritual understanding, and an overall grasp of what it means to be a human being. I believe that we're able to miraculously heal ourselves and others by using a combination of modern medicine and ancient principles and healing techniques. I believe that the time has come for us as a society to wake up to what we're truly capable of. And I believe that we are a higher being or a higher self or a God creator, what have you, pretending to be human for the sake of growth and evolution. I also believe, deep inside of my heart, that I have discovered and have been given a system to be able to heal ourselves to an infinite degree so that we can not only connect to our higher self, but integrate with our higher self and become our higher self so that we can live from that place and create miracles in our lives and the lives of others. My name is Ricky Goodall, and what I'm about to share with you in this video is very personal, very important to me, very vulnerable, makes me feel very vulnerable to share it. And you shouldn't believe anything that I'm going to tell you right now. So first of all, I'm looking at some notes over here on the side. That's why I keep looking to the side. You shouldn't believe anything that I'm going to tell you. I'm a human being with psychology and preconceived ideas and influences just like anyone else. I'm recording this material and sharing this information not to convince you of anything, but simply to inspire you to find a truth that works for you. I'm sharing everything in this program and in this concept to inspire you to find a truth that resonates with you and helps you find the peace, happiness, fulfillment, and freedom that you truly deserve as a human being. The information I'm going to share with you is going to sound a little bit out there to some people. Some of it's a little bit hooky maybe, or hokey, or woo-woo, or what have you. This was not my background. My background wasn't the kind of a spiritual person or a religious person by any means. I didn't believe in this stuff until I started experiencing it myself. And then experiencing is believing, whether we like it or not in some cases. So I'm going to share my story with you and how I discovered the path and what the path means to me and why I'm so driven and passionate about sharing it with other people. Again, the information I'm going to share with you in this video and in all of the videos are just based on my perspective and the perspective of the healers and the coaches and the spiritual leaders I've connected to and the information that I've studied and the ceremonies I've experienced. But again, it's not to convince you of anything. It's simply to inspire you to question everything I'm saying. Prove me wrong if you must, as long as it leads you to find your own truth. That's what this is for. I was born and raised in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia in Canada, in a city beside Halifax, until I was 8 years old. And then I moved to a small little area called Pictou County. While living in Dartmouth, my parents were drug dealers and I guess you could say hippie bikers. They used a lot of heavy drugs, a lot of drinking, a lot of crazy parties, a lot of crime, a lot of connections to different dangerous people. And by the time I was 8 years old, we were essentially forced to move away from the city that we were living in to a small town of about 2,000 people. Moving to that town was traumatizing in itself because I had to leave everything I owned as a kid at 8 years old, all my friends, all my toys, all my clothes, everything. We just packed everything in a car and we drove away overnight. We left in 1 day notice. Never spoke to most of our friends ever again. Even to this day, I've only reconnected with maybe 2 or 3 of the friends I had at that time. Synchronistically, magically, miraculously, not because we keep in touch, or kept in touch rather. My parents split up around 9 years old, and then I was taken to foster care at 10 years old. That foster care experience was devastating for me. My mom and my dad split up. My brother and I stayed with my mom, and then 6 months later, I was taken to foster care. My brother was allowed to stay home, and it was a devastating experience for me. I moved in with my dad around 11 years old after about 9 to 10 months in foster care. And for a while, things were good in my life. I started martial arts and music around the age of 13, which is around the exact same time that my dad started letting me have friends over to drink if I wanted to, just 13 years old. I had all of the freedom I wanted as a child for the most part, as long as I didn't do anything to hurt anyone else or to hurt myself, as long as I didn't do anything seriously illegal, as long as I didn't get caught doing anything seriously illegal, I should say. And so around 13, I started martial arts and music. I started karate and I started playing guitar. I played piano a little bit before that, but those were basically my main influences. Those two influences, as you'll learn throughout this program, were the fundamental aspects of my life changing. Martial arts instilled a level of discipline and self-respect in me that I didn't have before, and courage that I never imagined possible. Music allowed me to express myself in a way that I'd never expressed myself before, and to be able to learn technical songs and technical music that before had only been in my imagination. At 15 years old, my father was taken to jail for a short period of time. Between 11 and 15, my dad got in so many fights and was in trouble with the law so often that the court in Pictou County recognized me and my father when we were there because he had been there so much. And by 15 years old, he was taken to jail for a short period of time, and I had to move out on my own. At this point, I'd been in and out of foster care multiple times, and the Children's Aid came, which is the organization in Canada that works with children when they're in situations like I was in, and they told me they were going to take me to foster care again. And I said, if I go to foster care, I'm going to run away. What else can you do for me? And they gave me social assistance to live off of while I was 15 until I turned 16 when I could get a job. At 16 years old, I got a job at McDonald's first, then I joined the military, the Canadian Forces Reserves, with the intention of eventually going to the Royal Military College to become a sniper so that I could be a professional sniper and hopefully join a joint task force later on in my adult years. Unfortunately, in the medical screening for my time in the military, I found out that I had a slight color blindness and that I wouldn't be able to see people in camouflage or be able to cut the right wires potentially. And my career as a sniper was cut short, a lot shorter than I anticipated, which is totally fine by me looking back, of course. So I started putting more energy and more focus into martial arts. I went to university for a little bit for psychology and biology. I dropped out. I was living with roommates who wanted to party all the time, and we had keg parties and lots of fun, and I dropped out of university. It didn't work for me. At 19 years old, I started dating a girl who had 3 children that weren't mine, and they were Native American children at that. She wasn't Native American, but her ex-husband was. And Native Americans in Canada, especially 20 years ago or 10, 15 years ago, are still not getting treated with the respect that they deserve, considering how much wisdom that they bring to the table when it comes to understanding how to heal, and the fact that they know our land better than we could ever imagine. And so raising these 3 children with my own traumas, which you'll learn about soon, because at this point I didn't really know about my traumas, it was a devastating relationship. We broke up constantly breaking up. In 5 years of being together, we broke up at least probably a couple of dozen times. At 22 years old, we broke up. When I was 22 years old, we broke up at one point. She kicked me out of the house, and then I lost my job the next day, and all of a sudden, I'm jobless and homeless at 22 years old, sleeping on people's couches. This wasn't the first time I was experiencing homelessness like this, but this is one of the most devastating. Living in Pictou County was challenging. New Glasgow, the main town in Pictou County that I spent most of my time in, was rated number 1 of the 100 worst places to live in Canada 2 years in a row, according to Money Sense magazine. Think about this. There are children growing up in this area where there's no money, there's very little resources. Not that there's no money, there's little money, very little resources for people to really grow up and become something and become a powerful contribution to the world. And so around the time of 22, I was homeless, jobless, sleeping on my friend's couch, and he all but forced me to watch the movie The Secret. And when I watched the movie The Secret, something shifted in me. All of a sudden, it felt like I knew what they were talking about. It felt like I'd seen it before, and I did in some way experience what The Secret tells you, which is about visualizing and attracting experiences into your life. And although I don't agree that we attract experiences to us, which you'll learn throughout this presentation, the experience certainly feels like we're attracting things to us. And so when I watched the movie The Secret, I realized that I'd use these visualization techniques to become a musician, and I used these visualization techniques in martial arts, and I'd used meditation, I'd used some of these other techniques. And so within a few months after that, watching that movie, my girlfriend and I got back together. We went to see our first ever mixed martial arts cage fight here in Nova Scotia. It just had gotten legalized in 2006, and I waited for 2 hours in the rain with her in the line to get into the event. And then we watched these cage fights, these mixed martial arts fights, like the UFC kind of stuff. And I was just, oh, wow, this is what I want to do. We were in the nosebleed section, looking down at, in the forum in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in this experience, saying, I'm going to do this someday. I got home from that event, and I found one of the pictures of the fighters that were on the event, and I printed his picture off, and I put my face over top of his face and put it on my bulletin board at home, and kept staring at it almost every day unconsciously. And within about 6 months, I was offered my first mixed martial arts cage fight. I'd started training at a gym in Pictou County that offers judo and jiu-jitsu called the Pictou County Titans, run by a couple of guys named Jared McIntosh and Jason Rorson. Incredible club, incredible instructors. And I had a 5-week notice to drop almost 40 pounds from 245 pounds, which is what I was weighing at that time, down to 205 or 200 pounds to weigh in to fight this experienced, very lean, 6'3" kickboxer. And so I trained my butt off every day with these coaches to drop the weight, and I finally dropped the weight. And when we weighed in, the other guy, I'm 5'9", so the other guy was quite a bit taller than me. And we fought the fight, and in the first round, I was losing badly. My head was bouncing off the mat, and then the buzzer went, and I was saved by the bell. I came back in the second round and started to win, and then the third round, I finally won the fight by 1 point and continued my mixed martial arts career from there. From that point forward, 2006 until 2000 and I guess it would have been 2014, I fought 21 mixed martial arts fights all over Canada. I fought for world championships, pay-per-view, television. I had sponsors, I had free cars, I fought for main events, and I created an entire career out of it. I just, again, continued visualizing, imagining, working hard, taking action, asking for sponsors, asking people to support me. And I went from being jobless and homeless to becoming a world championship competitor and pay-per-view fighter, main event fighter, and in some cases, nationally recognized and internationally recognized. I traveled to other places like Las Vegas to train. I traveled all over the country. I fought in New Brunswick multiple times, in Nova Scotia, Alberta, Quebec. And around the same time, I went to school for business. I was laid off from a boss who didn't have the right to fire me, or not laid off, sorry, fired. He didn't have the right to fire me, so I fought back and went to the labor board and was awarded compensation and employment insurance. And then I used the employment insurance to pay for me to go to school for business. So I ended up going to school for business completely free. Again, something that I visualized and intended for. Throughout the process of becoming an entrepreneur in business school, I also became a nutrition coach around the same time. I'd started to develop a real passion for nutrition and healthy eating and getting healthier, and I found a nutrition coaching certification program for $200 online. I took the program, started researching everything I could, read all the books I could, read all the articles, watched the documentaries, and eventually worked with 1,500 nutrition clients all over the world, some of them UFC fighters, fitness models, gold medal athletes, Olympic contenders, and more. Finally, in 2012, which is an important date that I'll be talking about in a few moments, I fought a fighter named Joe Ray, an incredibly experienced Muay Thai champion from California, he and I were now the main event in the same forum that I told you earlier. I watched the first legal MMA event in Canada, or in Nova Scotia. I watched it there, and now I'm fighting in the same forum as the main event against an incredibly powerful and experienced opponent. In the first round, I was winning the fight. Everything was going really well. It was great. I felt like I was in my groove. And then there were 10 seconds left in the final round. The referee knocks on the on the floor to give you a warning, the 10-second warning. There are only 10 seconds left in the round. And my coach said, finish the round, finish the round. And I felt in my intuition that I didn't have to do anything to finish the round. I just had to keep doing what I was doing. But I was scared, and I listened to him. And I moved in, and this fighter caught me with a hard punch and knocked me out cold. I was out for 2 minutes straight, approximately 2 minutes. I got up, apparently, I don't remember any of this. I got up and did an interview with the ring announcer. I walked out of the cage. I did an interview with the newspaper. I got into a stretcher and was wheeled out into an ambulance. And to this day, none of that memory has come back to me. At that point, my reality was shattered. I realized that I trained so hard for that fight. And when it comes to matching skills, it's hard to say whether he was more skilled or I was more skilled. I was winning the fight, but I got knocked out. So I realized in that moment that I could try so hard for this fighting game. I could work my ass off for it and still lose despite how much effort I put in. I was really discouraged. And my life started to change after that. It was not my last fight, but it was certainly the beginning of the end. Shortly after that, I'd been dating a fitness model at the time. Her and I had done a lot of heavy drugs together, a lot of heavy partying together, sometimes up days in a row, a couple of days in a row. When I wasn't training for a fight, I was partying hard. I was doing cocaine, I was doing ecstasy, I was doing MDMA, I was drinking all of the time. I was also working at bars as a head bouncer with my coach and some of my teammates. You might hear some background noise here. I have my window open. It's a really hot day here in Canada in the summer here. It's my favorite time of year here in Canada. So me and this girlfriend are going through this crazy lifestyle. We're going to places like Vegas and Mexico and doing heavy drugs the whole time we're there. And finally, I start to get unhappy after this breakup. I start to realize that my purpose, that I thought my purpose was to become a UFC fighter and move into this direction, but really I just wanted to party. I wanted to do all of these other kinds of things. And shortly after this fight, me and this girlfriend broke up, and it devastated me. It completely devastated me. We broke up at one point before for a little bit, and then we broke up again, and it totally devastated me. I thought that I was going to marry this girl. I thought we were going to spend the rest of our life together, and I was at complete rock bottom. And when I say rock bottom, I don't just mean that I was sad about a breakup. I was in severe emotional pain. I was nearly suicidal. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was crying all the time. I couldn't understand it. Logically, it didn't make sense because I didn't even want to be with this girl anymore. I knew that we weren't a good fit. She was a great girl. We had lots of fun, but I didn't want to be with her anymore, but I couldn't seem to let her go, and I didn't know why. And so there's this one day where my friend says, well, why don't you watch The Secret again? Maybe that will help. So I watched the movie The Secret again, and now this is years after I'd watched it the first time. And although it created a lot of changes in my life, I didn't quite get it. I knew that 500 million people watched this movie, yet so many people were still struggling. Why are they still struggling? Why are they still having such a hard time in life? How could 500 million people watch a movie that's supposed to have the answers and then still struggle? So I started studying the stars of the movie and learning more about them, learning about their backgrounds, learning about what they've done to heal, how they've gotten to where they were. And I learned that nearly every person in the movie practiced meditation. So I start looking into meditation, trying to figure out how do I learn to meditate. I'd done it in karate years before, but I didn't really remember how. So I'm watching videos on YouTube. I'm learning about Deepak Chopra's methods, and I'm learning about transcendental meditation methods. And I'm learning about Vipassana meditation, insight, all these different types of meditation. Finally, I get connected with a transcendental meditation instructor. Now, transcendental meditation is a very intense form of meditation where no meditation is really that intense, I don't think, but intense as in it's 4 days of training in a row with an instructor, practicing meditation every day, multiple times with him in these courses, maybe like 3 or 4 hours at a time. And the idea is that you meditate twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, and you repeat this mantra in your head the whole time you're doing it. And it started to work for me. I started to experience some peace and some calmness. I also learned that meditation can help us manifest or attract the things we wanted. And I was watching the movie The Secret and meditating at this time to try to attract my ex back. I wasn't trying to better my life yet because I didn't know why I was so attached to her. I didn't know why I couldn't let her go. But I'm still experiencing anxiety at this point, still experiencing a lot of depression, a lot of stress. And the same friend that suggested The Secret said, why don't you smoke a little bit of cannabis and just relax a little bit? Try to see if you can relax. And at this point, I hadn't used cannabis for my own enjoyment very often, maybe once in a while, but not really. And it kind of made me paranoid sometimes. But I thought, well, what do I have to lose? So I smoke some cannabis, I lay down on my bed and I start to meditate, and then all of a sudden this memory comes back to me in crystal clear, like HD vision. And the memory is of me going to foster care as a child, and all of a sudden I recognized, not in a deep way, but in a very shallow way, I recognized that my relationship with my mother and being taken to foster care was very much a reflection of my relationships and the feeling of abandonment that I would experience in my intimate relationships. And my mind was blown. I immediately start searching out a psychologist. I go see a psychologist. I start talking to her about it. She teaches me a little bit about the inner child and how our inner child is responsible for a lot of the pain that we experience in our lives, but she didn't quite understand it at a deep level beyond that either. So I tried things like hypnotherapy and emotional freedom technique and Reiki for the first time and shamanism, and I'm just digging and digging and digging, trying to figure out how to heal myself. Again, this isn't around 2012, 2013. Someone introduces me to the podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, and I start listening to Joe Rogan's different videos, and he introduces me to things like the Onnit supplement brand, who I was sponsored by for a while, Bulletproof Coffee, who I was also sponsored by for a while. And he also talks a lot about DMT and ayahuasca. And at this point, I'd never really heard of either and didn't even know what they were. And then I started talking to the same friend that's introduced The Secret to me. He'd heard of DMT before too, and he didn't know much about it or how to get it or anything like that. And so around this time, I start healing from my relationship. I start moving forward in my life. I build my nutrition coaching career. Now I'm speaking on stages, I'm writing for magazines, and I'm doing different things in an entrepreneurial way to build my business. I end up opening a supplement store after my business college finishes, and I open a small supplement store inside of the MMA gym that I was training at, the mixed martial arts gym. I open another location somewhere else. I eventually open a location in a yoga studio. And in the yoga studio, I start realizing, I'd really like to own my own wellness center. I'd like to have a business like this of my own. I didn't have any money in savings. I didn't have any credit. I didn't know how to open a business like that. But I started talking to a personal trainer who had the same idea. And he and I started meeting every week for mastermind meetings, talking about what we wanted to create, imagining it, visualizing it, really creating the idea in our mind. Then all of a sudden, I start dating a new girlfriend. Things are going really good in my life. And it's around Christmas time. He and I are trying to find a place to put this wellness center. We finally gave up to take a break for the holidays. And then somebody contacts us and says, I have a space for you to look at if you're interested. We go and look at the space. It's almost identical to the space that we are visualizing. There's a top floor where we can have all of our offices and all of our massage clinics and things like this. And then downstairs, there was already a fitness gym there that could potentially be bought later on or something like that. At least that's what we thought. And so we opened the wellness center, $0. We asked the landlord to give us a month of free rent. We asked an equipment company to give us all of our gear for 3 months with no payments. We find somebody to rent an office for us as soon as we opened. So not only did we open with $0, but we opened with money in the bank, which was really amazing, considering for us it was an 1,100 square foot building, commercial building, that we had no idea how we were going to make it happen, but we did. And that business stayed open for almost 2 years. Again, starting with $0. During that time of having that wellness center open, my previous relationship had been rocky. My new relationship, I started dating a much younger girl who was from another country, who told my friends and I that she had all this experience using heavy drugs, and it was not true. She didn't have any experience at all. We ended up going to the Dominican Republic together and did heavy drugs every day the entire time we were there. And I didn't know, but she'd develop a drug problem behind my back after that. As my life started to change and I started moving into the spiritual path, that old lifestyle no longer resonated with me anymore. I didn't want to be doing heavy drugs. I didn't want to be drinking. I started doing this deeper healing work and running a wellness center, and I really needed to live in alignment with that. And I was surprised at how many professionals lived one life in the daytime and another life completely on the weekend. Some of the people that I was doing these heavy drugs with, which again, you'll learn throughout this program that that's a manifestation of pain, unhealed pain that we all have inside of us. As I'm running this wellness center, things are growing and things are doing well. All of a sudden, a man reaches out to me and says, he calls the wellness center one day and says, I'm here to help you. And I'm thinking, who are you? He's 2 years younger than me and says he's here to help. Well, what are you here to help with? I'm here to help you. He comes and he starts hanging around the wellness center, starts teaching me about how we can release trauma from our body through things like yoga and breathing and eating healthy and eating even more healthy than what I'd learned in my nutrition coaching. Most of my nutrition background was sports nutrition, so basically making ourselves look good but not necessarily being entirely healthy. And this guy approached nutrition from more of a holistic perspective. Around this same time, I'd been introduced to DMT, dimethyltryptamine, the most powerful psychedelic substance on the planet. A friend managed to get some. It's a crystal powder. This particular version of it is a crystal powder extracted from a bark called mimosa bark. And mimosa bark comes from Brazil. I tried the DMT probably 10 or 12 times. And then this man says to me, well, you have some? And I said, yeah. He's like, oh, can we go to your house and try some? I've done some work with these plants before. Again, at this point, I was still the Ricky Goodall coming off MMA fighter, so I was very arrogant, very full of myself. If any of you know me personally for a long time, that won't sound like a huge surprise to you. And he said, can we go try it at your house? And I said, yeah, sure, whatever. So we go to my house, and I set it up, and I smoke some, and I have a trip. And before I smoke it, he says, can I show you how to do it? And I said, I already know how to do it. And I smoke some and I have an interesting experience. And he says, okay, can I show you now? Can I show you how I do it? I guess so, sure. And as he's preparing the crystals, they're crystals and you mix them with an herb, this particular way we were doing it, and you mix them together. And he says, you want to let the medicines get to know each other instead of just kind of fumbling around with them. Just let them mix a little bit, take it slow, show them respect. These are feminine plants. They need to be handled with care and finesse. Again, I was thinking, whatever. I don't know what he's talking about. So he puts it in the pipe and he says, now this time I'm going to hold it for you. Now usually when a person uses DMT, they maybe take 2 or 3 big inhales of it. And I don't suggest that you use any of these medicines without a shaman or a guide or somebody that can help you use them properly. Usually you breathe in 3 times, you hold, according to the stuff my friend found on the internet, my other friend, you breathe it in, you hold it for 5 seconds and you let it go, and then after 3 big puffs you have this really intense psychedelic experience. But not really an enlightening psychedelic experience, just an intense one where your consciousness is kind of blown wide open, but not necessarily a lot of insights or guidance. So this guy says, okay, so I'm going to hold it for you and I'm going to get you to breathe in and hold it for as long as you can. And you're going to breathe out, and then you're going to breathe in just air, and then you're going to take another one, and you're going to keep doing that until I tell you that we're finished. So again, this is like taking a big breath, clearing out, breathing in, holding it as long as I can, letting it go, taking a deep breath, breathing in, holding it as long as I can, letting it go, taking a deep breath. And we probably did that 4, maybe 5 times before he let me lay down into the trip. And when I laid down, all of a sudden my consciousness just expanded to the point where I became God. I became creator. I became the conscious universe. And I could see everything, matter, and how the universe was manifesting from that perspective. And I knew in my heart that this guy in the room was a reflection of my consciousness, that the room I was in was a reflection of my consciousness, that I'd created this entire experience myself through my energy as the creator of my experience. And I came out and I said, what the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck? And he says, is that the experience that you were looking for? And I was like, wow, I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. He said, well, get up, you're going in again. And so we get up, he gets the DMT ready again, and this time I'm sitting up and he's feeding it to me. And in my vision, he puts his hands inside of my stomach. And he says, there's a sickness in here that we're gonna heal. A fighter isn't well. A fighter is somebody who's ill, and we're going to heal you. Lay down, he says. So I lay down, and he's whispering in my ear, and he says, open your eyes. And I open my eyes, and he's still whispering in my ear. I look over at him. I could see him whispering in my ear. He says, close your eyes. I close my eyes. He's whispering in my ear, saying all these things to me. And then finally, when I come out of the trip, I say, wow, that was incredible. That was amazing. What was that? What were you doing? He said, what do you mean? I said, you were talking to me the whole time. What were you saying? He said, I didn't say a word. This man was a shaman. And when I was in these experiences, his higher self was guiding me through the trip, through the journey, while he was just sitting there holding space for me in the room. And this was my first experience ever working with a shaman. And it was just life-changing. And we'd done a number of different ceremonies after that. The very basic ceremonies, setting intentions, but nothing more. Finally, in October of 2015, a friend reaches out to me and says, there's a guy who wants you to mentor him. I really think you should mentor him. He's a graphic designer. He wants to build this business. He doesn't really know what he's doing. I had a lot going on at the time. And I was like, oh, all right, well, send him to me and I'll have a conversation with him at least and see if I can help him. I checked my horoscope that day and it says, somebody's going to ask you to mentor them and you're not going to want to, but you really should, basically, in those words. And I thought, that's really strange. So this guy comes and starts working at my wellness center a little bit. He's a graphic designer. He does some graphic design work for us, helps build some of the website. And then one day he says, have you ever experienced magic ceremony before? I said, magic? What do you mean by magic? Like Wicca, like paganism? He's like, well, those are forms of magic. He said, but there are many forms of magic, but there's a general overarching concept when it comes to magic, and it's called kind of like high magic or temple magic. And I'd never heard of it before. I had no idea what he was talking about. He says, well, if you'd like, I can put you through an initiation ceremony. Now, this is probably the most important part of this presentation. This is probably the most important part of this entire program. And this is probably the most important part of what's, I believe, wrong with our society, or what our society's struggling with right now. And it's the lack of initiation. It's the lack of being initiated into a higher form of thinking, a higher way of seeing the world. And he says there's an initiation ceremony, and I can put you through it if you like. Okay, sure. And he says, well, we're going to use psilocybin mushrooms, magic mushrooms, for the experience. Okay, sounds good. And he says, I'll come over to your house and I'll bring everything to set up. So he comes to my house and he's got this backpack full of stuff. I was like, wow, what are we doing here? He puts candles in 4 different corners to line up with the north, east, southwest lines. So the east is where we put the altar, facing the east, because that's where the sun comes up. And then there were candles in the south, the west, and the north. There was a black and a white candle on the altar as well. And I had no idea what any of this stuff was for. I didn't get it. And he says, when we're in this space, we don't leave the space unless we draw a special symbol. And then you can leave the space, and then when you come back in, you draw the same symbol back. I didn't really get it. Why is this, like, is this even real? Like, what is this nonsense? And then we go through the initiation. And he initiates me, he reads me this prayer, and I have to agree to the prayer. And then he initiates me, which is basically an oral tradition passed on from one person to another, to sort of like a death and a resurrection, almost like a baptism kind of experience, where you're now under the view of the God and the Goddess, under the Mother and the Father, under the great divine oneness as your witness. You're saying in an initiation ceremony, I accept the possibility that there's something far greater than my own awareness. I accept the possibility that not only is there something greater than my awareness, but I am part of that awareness. And I accept the possibility that there is so much more to my life than I realize. In that initiation ceremony, for the first time in my entire life, I witnessed this man not only channel higher wisdom and tell me things about my life I'd never told anyone before, but be able to have this higher self take over his body and have him chanting and moving around and doing things that didn't make any logical sense except for the fact that he was in this higher tranced state. Now, we'd done, from that point forward, for a few months, we did probably 20 or more of these high magic, temple magic ceremonies. And the reason I call it temple magic, that's a term that I don't know if anyone's used before. I'm sure it has been. But the reason I call it temple magic is because when you set up those 4 candles, northeast, southwest, what you're creating is a temple in that space. You're creating an energetic temple anywhere you go. You can do this anywhere in the world. And it's based on fundamental geometry of nature. So it's the same in Hebrew and Egyptian and shamanism and any other practices that use the northeast southwest lines to create a sacred space. In the Native American cultures, they call it a medicine circle. In some alchemy circles, they call it a transmutation circle. It's also called a sacred circle or a sacred sphere. I call it a transformation space. There are many names for this ancient practice, but it's far more powerful than we realize. And as you'll learn throughout this program, this temple magic, creating this sacred space, is fundamental when it comes to really reprogramming our mind. It's an incredibly powerful way to do it. It's not the only way, but it's an incredibly powerful way to do it. After that initiation ceremony, somebody donated $50,000 to my business to help us pay off a lot of the debts that we were in. Somebody gave me a $10,000 car right off the lot. I eventually paid off the debts and closed that wellness center because I was miserable working it. My business partner left. I was not fun anymore. It was not fun anymore, and I eventually changed after the initiation ceremony. I met a partner who I ended up getting engaged to and had an incredible relationship for a very long time, a lot of really deep healing together, and we ended on good notes. The relationship eventually came to a point where we both just knew we were moving in different directions, but we met right after that ceremony, and my life completely transformed after this experience. This was October of 2015. I started to recognize some really fundamental ideas about nature, and first of all, one of the things that I was introduced to that I'd never really even understood before was the sign of the pentagram. And as you'll learn throughout this program, this sign, pardon my drawing, this sign is so important for us to understand when it comes to deeply healing ourselves from a spiritual perspective. It's not the only way to understand it. Again, everything I'm going to share with you in this program is just one way. It's just my way that's come to me, that I've been guided to share with the world. But this sign came to me. Now, for a lot of time before that in my life, I thought that sign meant evil. I thought it meant Satanism. I thought it meant so many of these terrible things. And first of all, they're not terrible things. Most of them are actually just misunderstood and from a different perspective of reality that you don't have to resonate with. I don't necessarily resonate with it. And it's actually a symbol that represents something a lot more divine than I realized. I'm not going to tell you what it means yet. You might already know, but I'll tell you shortly. So a few months later, this guy ends up moving back to Ottawa, and I decide to close my wellness center. And as I close my wellness center, all of a sudden I have this identity crisis. I'm no longer Ricky Goodall, the MMA fighter. I'm no longer Ricky Goodall, the wellness center owner. All I'm doing is just living from home, coaching people, doing this life coaching stuff that I sort of was just combining my meditation coaching, my nutrition coaching, my personal training background, bringing it together and trying to coach people using the spiritual principles that I'd learned up to this point. So I start looking up really great life coaches. I find this life coach on YouTube called Rich Litvin. Rich Litvin's from the UK. He's based in California, and he is one of the most powerful coaches in the world. And I start watching his videos and seeing he's got actual videos of him coaching people on YouTube. And I'm thinking, wow, the work he does is next level. This is way beyond anything I'd ever experienced before, but also aligned with everything I believe in. Aligned with us creating our reality, aligned with us healing ourselves so that we can create a more powerful experience in our reality. So I email this guy around April of 2016, and I beg him to coach me. I say, I'll be the best success story you ever heard. I want to change the world. I want to help heal the world. Please give me a chance. He doesn't respond to me. May of 2016, a friend and I planned a trip to go to Peru for the first time to experience a shamanic ayahuasca retreat in Cusco, Peru. My friend picked the retreat center. I had nothing to do with choosing it. He picked it, and we went there. Now, when we went to Peru, it was just breathtaking. Mountains everywhere, ancient sites, ancient temples, things I'd never experienced before. To prepare for the ayahuasca retreat, we happened to go to a place called Etnikas, Etnikas. And if you're interested in learning about ayahuasca or experiencing a real, truly authentic Shipibo Andean ayahuasca ceremony, these are ancient, come from the Inca line, the ancient natives from Peru.